Hey guys, this is Argent. So, I really love this movie. I would not recommend watching the last 10 minutes of this film as it ruins the rest of this film. The whole movie is kind of like this profound, almost existential meditation on the nature of the unknown, and it's destroyed when we have one of the worst revelations in movie history. Um, there could be good revelations, but with all the build up in this film, the ending in no way delivers whatsoever, and is just a massive, massive disappointment. I also am not interested in reading the book or watching any of the other films, even though I really like this movie, and we'll get into that. This movie is very surreal, oftentimes kind of scary, and I find this kind of an interesting, as I said, existentialist meditation on the unknown, on hope, I guess to a certain extent indirectly on religion, and on the human will to survive. It kind of reminds me of Beyond the Thunderdome a bit, but done a lot better. Um, this could have been the beginning of a pretty amazing series, but what wound up happening was really dumb. And the villains are called Wicked, and the tagline they try to introduce is "Wicked is good," which is literally like some lame preschool shit. So let's talk about Maze Runner and what happens in the film. So the premise is, and we learn about this as time goes on, it's kind of, as with most good movies, you have a protagonist who's introduced into the universe. There's someone who's kind of relatable. I mean, Star Wars is kind of the ultimate example of this. We have Frodo too. But in a movie that kind of takes place in a very different world, it's nice to have a character who doesn't really know anything, who doesn't know kind of what the background of the world is, who doesn't know what how things work. So as Plinkett put it, things can be explained to him, and so they're explained to us because the guy doesn't really have any idea what he's doing. We don't really have any idea how the world's doing, so he can ask questions on our behalf, and it's explained to him and it's explained to us in kind of a more natural way than just characters who already know this stuff monologuing for seemingly no reason. So the main character, Thomas, is a 16-year-old boy who wakes up inside an underground service elevator with no memory of his identity. Um, he is in this large grassy area called the Glade that is encompassed by tall stone walls. So already I kind of like the setting. We don't know why they're here. It's very strange. It's disturbingly kind of tranquil within the glade, and there's these massive stone walls that seem too big to have been built by a human. So that's pretty cool to start off with. I like that. The whole no memory thing, the whole complete aura of mystery surrounding what's happening, really kind of pulls you in. Actually, I'm going to recommend right now, if you haven't seen the movie and you think you might, don't listen to this review because I'm going to spoil everything that happens. So, every month, a new boy and supplies arrive in the elevator. This is explained to Thomas by the boys who call themselves Gladers. They have formed a rudimentary society with each assuming specialized tasks. Now, I like movies where they kind of talk about doing things. Let me explain that. I like kind of survival movies where they talk about, or survival books where they talk about how they do stuff, like how they build things, how they kind of figure out crops, how they divvy up uh, roles, just kind of the customs and stuff that develop in these micro societies. Because it's very interesting because you can kind of learn every aspect of a micro society, and then you can kind of see how that performs on kind of a wider basis. It's also just kind of interesting, I find, to see kind of the innovativeness and how they scavenge things and how they build stuff. So they are led by the oldest boy named Albie, who is the first to arrive in the glade. He says that every boy eventually recalls his name, but none remember their past, which is once again pretty neat. So the boy learns that a vast maze surrounding the glade may provide the only way out. During the day, there are people called runners, aka the Maze Runner, the title, who search the maze for an escape route, returning before nightfall when the entrance closes. No one has ever survived a night outside the maze. The maze also shifts around during the day and night, making it extremely difficult to get back. Needless to say, a lot of runners die when they're outside the walls. I think they also scavenge for resources in the other parts of the maze. So already we kind of have this interesting thing of safety versus reward. It's kind of the quandary a lot of civilizations face. Because China chose to look inward to maintain its own stability and its own prosperity. And for almost 1,000 years, through successive dynasties, China was the wealthiest place on earth, with some of the best living standards, with some of the greatest technological accomplishments, because they decided to put harmony above all things. Western civilizations chose to pursue the unknown, to explore, to invent, to create weapons of great power, but also achievements of great beauty that vastly improved standards of living. So we have a group of boys who have a relatively static existence, but one where everybody's fed, everyone kind of is healthy, and things are going pretty good. They don't have any women, so they can't reproduce personally, but new boys will keep coming. So by the time the oldest ones start to get too old to do full work, there will be people there to replace them. So the question is, um, do we want to stay here where we're comfortable but live a relatively primitive existence, or do we want to try and get out and go and find something greater and better in the outside world? And we don't know what the outside world is, and that's kind of what makes it so interesting, and why it's kind of reminds me of Cube a bit. It's kind of a metaphor, because you're like, well, what's outside of it? Are they on an alien planet? I thought maybe they were colonists. Is this some sort of thing like aliens, some game aliens are playing? Is this something some corporation or some sociologist is doing to try to figure out how people act in such a situation? I would almost, compared to what happened, I would prefer just not knowing. Kind of like in Cube. Like in Cube, they kind of have a solution, but it's not that interesting or well explored. So let's see here. Well, in a competition for dominance with another boy named Captain Golly, Thomas suddenly remembers his name, that it's Thomas. The next day, Thomas is attacked by Ben, a runner who has been stunned by a griefer, which is a deadly techno-organic creature that roam the maze at night. Ben is forced into the maze and left to die, as there's no cure for what the griefer infected him with. They basically go insane and kind of become like, husks from Mass Effect are kind of like zombies. They start to lose their higher brain functions and just try to kill people. So the leader of the so let's see here. So they leave him to die. Minhu, the leader of the runners, and Albie later retrace Ben's steps inside the maze, and Minhu reappears at dusk dragging Albie, who is stung, but they are unable to reach the closed entrance in time. Thomas runs into the maze to help, but all three are trapped. During the night in the maze, Thomas and Minhu tie up Albie high on the maze wall to hide him from the griefers. Minhu abandons Thomas when a griefer emerges from the center of the maze and leaves Thomas to go and basically die. Um, well, the griefer attacks them. The griefers are really scary looking. They are indeed they look kind of like weird, like slug-like reptilian cyborgs, and it's actually quite scary and intense as Thomas gets chased by one. They kind of have like walker bodies, if I'm remembering correctly. So Minhu abandons Thomas. There's a griefer at the center of the maze. There are different quadrants of the maze, each which have a griefer in them, and griever, not griefer. I'm thinking of online gaming. So Thomas succeeds in sliding under a maze wall, hiding from the griefer. Later, Thomas finds Minhu, and his actions during the night keep them alive. He succeeds in killing a griefer by tricking it into a narrow closing passageway that caused it to be crushed, making him the first to ever survive a night in the maze and kill a griefer, to the other boys' astonishment upon them returning the next morning. Now, there is kind of a more conservative faction within the maze that is against the maze runners. They believe that by basically playing around with the outside world, they will change the conditions inside the world. That so long as they stay basically within the maze and they don't tempt fate, so long as they don't tempt fate, so long as they don't stay inside of the maze, they will be okay. They start trying to explore things, then what will happen is the griefers will come to them. So this is kind of once again a metaphor for, do you want to maintain your tranquil, balanced existence, or do you want to strive for something more? And kind of to me, the as I've talked about a number of times in the past, the infinity will, the soul of the West, is you have to seek more, you have to want more. That's just the way you are. You have to find out what's over that next hill. You got to find out what's in outer space. You've got to find out where you come from, who you are, and where you're going. These are all just kind of natural parts of Western man, and we really do see it quite blatantly within this movie. Because there's the faction who's like, you've killed the griefer, that will bring them home, and then there's the faction that says, eventually things might change anyways. Eventually the griefers might decide to stop tolerating us. Eventually the griefers might decide to change their mind. Eventually they might stop sending new boys out, and we'll be left here for dead. And you kind of see these two things, and it's about kind of two fundamental different approaches to life. I don't really want to call them liberal or conservative. I think it's a little more fundamental and a little more, I guess, kind of, trying to think of a way to put it, a little more kind of philosophical than that. I kind of see it, as I said, more of tranquility versus wanting more, or kind of the infinity will versus what I call it, kind of the path of heaven, in one of my books. That's walked by East Asians who prefer stability, tranquility, and reliability above the ability to get more and the ability to do more. And I don't think either answer is particularly bad. They each have advantages and disadvantages. We hold within us the Promethean will to power, which also can lead to our destruction through things like nuclear weapons and trying social experiments like multiculturalism. At the same time, the stagnancy that tends to predominate in East Asian societies leads to them getting wrecked by more dynamic societies, which can come up against them. So it's kind of this interesting thing, and the movie kind of acts as a metaphor for that. So as you can see, I really like this film. I think it's a very good movie. So moving along in the plot, the next day, the first ever girl arrives, which I'm very scared of. There's a note that says, "This is the last one ever." So a lot of the people get really angry about it because they believe that by Thomas killing the griever and surviving, they fundamentally changed the rules, and now we're at a state where things will finally change, but there's also the potential for the complete destruction of their little society. Now, you gotta feel really bad for the girl, because you have a lot of boys who are just going through puberty and she's the only female. So you're like scared that they're gonna like start raping her or whatever, but that doesn't really seem to happen. Maybe the idea is that she'll bear children for the rest of her natural life. And, yeah, so she seems to know who Thomas is. So they find the griefer corpse and remove a beeping mechanical device from it. Galley claims Thomas has jeopardized the fragile peace between the Gladiators and the Grievers and wants him punished. But Newt, the group's second highest in command, immediately designates Thomas a runner, which is basically a death sentence. Minhu shows Thomas a scale model of the maze he built based on his 3 years of exploration. He's discovered basically the entirety of the maze. They largely just go out to look for resources and to maintain the fiction that they're still trying to get out, because kind of the faith that one day they'll figure out a way out of the maze is partially what keeps people going. I guess it's kind of a metaphor for religion to a certain extent. The maze's numbered sections open and close in a standard sequence that might be a code. The device that they take from the griever corresponds to a certain section of the maze. With the mechanical device, they may be able to find an escape route because they believe the mechanical device to be kind of like a key, kind of like a garage door opener to get out. So the girl has 2 syringes filled with an unknown substance. One is used on Albie, and he gradually recovers from the griever sting and begins to regain his memories. Minhu and Thomas venture back in the maze and discover a possible exit but are nearly trapped, barely making it back to the glade. That night, the maze's entrance does not close while others open, letting grievers pour in. A massacre ensures the gladers who are defenseless against these abominations struggle to fight back or hide. A number of characters are killed during the attack, and Thomas is assaulted by Gally, who is the leader of the kind of the conservative faction. Thomas, who has his disconnected memory flashes since arriving, stabs himself with a Griever stinger in an attempt to revive his memory uh, through the near-death experience. They stab him with the last anti-venom, and he recalls that he and Teresa worked for the organization that created the maze, Wicked, World Catastrophe Kill Zone Department. Uh-oh, we're heading towards the lameness. And the boys have unknowingly been test subjects for an experiment. Okay, well, there's still potential here. Maybe it's some kind of, like, cool psychological experiment. Maybe they're on, like, a different planet. Maybe they're all that remains of humanity. I mean, we got some potential here. So Thomas awakens and shares the information. Thomas then exposes himself and Teresa and confesses that he and she worked with the people who studied the boys for years. Meanwhile, Gally has taken command and intends to sacrifice Thomas and Teresa to the Grievers in an attempt to restore the peace. Um, Most of the Gladers side with Thomas and Teresa in an attempt to escape the maze. A few, however, refuse to leave. Fighting Grievers as they go, Thomas and a few others... not Thomas, others are killed. The survivors eventually succeed in getting out by using the Griever that they killed's thing like a garage door opener to get through one of the exits. They enter a laboratory strewn with dead scientists, and a woman in a video explains that the planet has been devastated by a massive solar flare. Okay, well, that doesn't sound that bad. Followed by a massive pandemic of a virus called the flare that affects the brain of the infected. What? What? Why is there a virus? Like, this is lame. Why is there a virus? Why was it caused by a solar flare? Couldn't they have come up with something better than this? It's just so lame. It's just like you think there's gonna be some like higher meaning to it, and it's just a boring like zombie virus. Um, I kind of have this existential metaphor for change. It's just ruined by this fucking stupid virus thing. So we learn that the Gladers appear to be immune to the virus. The Gladers learned that this was part of experiments studying the way their brains worked as a resistance to the virus. At the end, the woman in the video shoots herself as the lab is being attacked by men with military-style weapons, but dressed more like mercenaries. Gally suddenly appears armed with a gun he found. Delirious from a griever's sting, he insists that they must stay in the maze, then aims at Thomas, intending to kill him. Minhu kills Gally with a spear, but Chuck is fatally shot, whoever the fuck Chuck is, protecting Thomas, who is devastated by his friend's death. Masked, our men rush in and take the group to a helicopter. As they fly over the maze, it is revealed to be placed in a vast desert. Eventually, the helicopter approaches a ruined city. The scene ends with the supposedly dead scientist meeting in a room. The leader notes the experiment has been a success, and the survivors are now entering phase 2. Um, the Scorch trials. Okay, well, that's so lame. I mean, so this was just a setup for something like completely unrelated. So it doesn't even really have anything to do with like anything existential or kind of anything fundamental. It's just some lame zombie movie that happened to have an interesting premise. And then the next couple movies are just them trying to survive, and then I think Thomas is the last one alive, and they dissect his brain and get the cure for the flare. And that's what it's all about. It's just some stupid zombie virus. Like, couldn't they have come up with something better? Like, aliens are doing it to understand the human spirit. People are doing it to, like, try to colonize a planet. Humanity sealed them in there as some kind of bizarre sacrifice. You know what would have been better? No answer. Like, maybe they just get out of the maze and it's like a desert and then the film ends. But no, there's no answer to any of these things. It's just a fucking terrible ending. I couldn't really describe how bad the ending was. So watch the movie. Don't watch When They Leave the Maze, and don't watch any of the sequels because they look absolutely wretched. I hope you enjoyed this review, perhaps more than the ending of the movie. This is Argent signing out.